In Romans chapter 8 verse 6 it says, "For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace." It's very similar to some wording in 2nd Nephi in the Book of Mormon, chapter 9, verse 39, where the prophet Jacob says, "O my beloved brethren, remember the awfulness in transgressing against that holy God, and also the awfulness of yielding to the enticings of that cunning one. Remember, to be carnally minded is death, and to be spiritually minded is life eternal." So that phrase, to be carnally minded is death, and to be spiritually minded is life, appears in both the New Testament and in the Book of Mormon. And this causes concern for some because the Book of Mormon, the prophet Jacob, existed several hundred years before the Apostle Paul, and they wouldn't have communicated. Paul wouldn't have been directly aware of Jacob's writings, and Jacob obviously wouldn't have been aware of Paul's writings. And so why are these similar phrases in here? For some people, they feel like it's evidence that the Book of Mormon wasn't written by who it purports to be written to, but it was instead written by Joseph Smith, who would be aware of Paul, and then he would be making up the words of Jacob. And so as he's making up the words of Jacob, he puts in this phrase that's very similar to what Paul would write, and it's evidence. It's Joseph's authorship slipping through. But so that is something, if you want to choose to believe that, that is one option, to choose to believe that. Another option, there's other theories to bring it up. One theory depends on how you think the Book of Mormon is translated. Several people think that the Book of Mormon is translated in ideas, and that Joseph Smith has to find words for those ideas. And since Joseph Smith grew up reading the Bible, several times those words end up mimicking phrases from the Bible. So in that interpretation, this is a translation, but God is revealing to Joseph Smith the idea of being carnally minded is death and spiritually minded is life, and the way that Joseph Smith expresses it, expresses that idea, writes that idea, mirrors terms in the Bible. So that is one way that several people that I know think about this issue and other issues that come up with the Book of Mormon. Another interpretation that I've heard that I think is interesting is that the person revealing the Book of Mormon, the divine entity revealing the Book of Mormon to Joseph Smith, isn't God directly, but is Moroni, or is Mormon. And so the angel Moroni, or an angelic Mormon, is the one giving the words to Joseph Smith. That helps explain some of the Hebraisms, because the person revealing the translation to Joseph Smith would have English as a second language, and that English is likely learned through scriptural means. We don't know how Moroni or Mormon would have learned their English in the eternities, but that theory would be a similar theory with Joseph Smith articulating ideas in terms that he was familiar with. A Mormon or Moroni angelic presence who learned English after death would quite possibly be aware of the writings of Paul and articulated that way. So that's another theory, that if people are faithful and they want to do it, that's something. The third theory is that it's just a true statement, and so it was revealed by God independently to both Jacob and to Paul, and therefore that's how it got in both scriptures. God is aware of both of those phrases, of both those instances, and he felt it important that both the Nephites and the people in Paul's day, the Christians in Paul's day, have that verse in their minds, have that verse available to them. And so God just revealed that truth in a similar way to both Jacob and to Paul. and that makes for the most traditional interpretation of the Book of Mormon, the most straightforward, probably the easiest to comprehend, is just the idea that it was just God's words, and God's the same person, whether he's talking to Paul or whether he's talking to Jacob. And so he revealed that idea, that those words to them similarly. So that's another interpretation of that as well. Personally, I am okay with any of the faithful interpretations. I don't mind any of those theories. I think that they're all okay theories, but it's what you choose to believe. I choose to believe that the Book of Mormon is real, is truly what it purports to be, the record of ancient prophets in the Promised Land, which is the Americas, and that they communicated with God, and that Joseph Smith translated it through divine means. And any theory that squares with that, I am okay accepting. But that's an interesting thing. And this by far isn't the only New Testamentism or Paulism in the Book of Mormon. There's several of them. And so creating a theory to deal with it is helpful. That's all.